OK, bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour, je suis très content que vous êtes ici. On a eu une très utile, très constructive, très productive premier jour de notre retraite du cabinet. Ce matin et pendant le déjeuner, l'enjeu principal était l'économie. Je sais, nous savons que l'économie, c'est l'enjeu principal pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Nous avons discuté l'abordabilité pour les familles canadiennes et qu'est-ce que le gouvernement peut faire pour, comme nous avons dit dans le budget, dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire toujours pour aider la croissance économique du Canada pour créer plus d'emplois. So it has been a really good cabinet retreat, a really good discussion so far. The focus this morning and over lunch has been the economy. I think that is entirely appropriate. I think that is what Canadians are focused on as well. We have spoken a lot today about the challenges Canadian families are facing, and we have talked a lot about the work that we are doing as a government, that Canadians are doing, Canadian people, Canadian businesses, to increase Canada's economic capacity, to increase growth, and to drive the creation of more good jobs for Canadians. We spoke very much about the challenges ahead. There is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility in the global economy. And we also spoke about the position of strength from which Canada enters this challenging period. Strongest economic growth in the G7 in 2022 so far, and a very strong jobs position, very strong December jobs numbers, and something that is really important to me, very record high labor force participation, and the highest participation in the labor force for women in prime working years. And I really emphasize that because for a Canadian, there are lots of things that affect your economic well-being. But I can't think of a single one that makes the biggest difference. That makes a bigger difference than whether you have a job or not. And when the COVID recession hit, our government's relentless focus was jobs, jobs, jobs. We knew that job loss was devastating for Canadians, and we have been working hard with Canadian people, with unions, with Canadian businesses to recover those lost jobs. We're now at more than 120% of the jobs lost to COVID, and that is really important for Canadians, for the people of Hamilton. OK, je suis prête à répondre à vos questions.
Minister, I'm wondering, Randy Boissonneau this morning said if we have less fiscal room, we won't be able to do as much. Is that the approach you're taking to budgeting, that some spending items that your government has promised will be taken off the table depending on how the recession plays out this year?
I think that's the approach that governments should always take to putting together a budget. If there's less fiscal room, you can do less.
We haven't seen that from your government, though.
I disagree. I think that in the April budget and in the fall economic statement, we were very, very focused on taking a fiscally responsible approach. And if you look at Canada's economic performance, at Canada's fiscal picture in 2022 in the international context, we had last year the lowest deficit in the G7, the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. And we pursued that approach for two reasons. The first was we understood that inflation was elevated, and that at a time of elevated inflation, it was really important for us not to pour fuel on the flames of inflation, not to make the Bank of Canada's job harder. And the second reason is we understood then and we understood now there's a lot of uncertainty in the world economy, and we have wanted to keep our powder dry.
Minister Freeland, I wanted to ask you about that most of our NATO allies now seem to have made a comment about whether or not they want to send tanks to Ukraine. Why is Canada so reluctant to explain what we want to do on that front?
Well, let me just start by saying that Canada is absolutely committed to supporting Ukraine, and we're going to be with the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes. And as finance minister, let me also add that I really believe that a clear, strategically viable and stable Ukrainian victory this year would be a big boost for the global economy and a big boost for Canada. And I say that because I think it's important for us as Canadians to understand we're supporting Ukraine because it's the right thing to do, because the brave and really smart resistance of the people of Ukraine, I think, has earned the admiration of the whole world. But we are also supporting Ukraine because it is in our national interest to do so. I'd also like to remind people that on the financial front, Canada is, on a per capita basis, one of the leading supporters of Ukraine. And that economic battlefield is a very important one. Helping the Ukrainian government to be viable every day, to pay pensions to Ukrainians, to literally keep the lights on is important, and we're there. Canada is also a very important military partner for Ukraine. My colleague, Anita Anand, who is here and with whom I've spoken about this today and yesterday, and with the Prime Minister, has said that everything is on the table when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Minister Anand recently announced 200 Rochelles going to Ukraine, and we are going to continue supporting Ukraine because that's the right thing to do.
À propos des risques, vous parlez des challenges ahead, des risques devant le Canada. Quels sont-ils? Est-ce qu'on parle d'une récession? Et j'aimerais ça vous entendre aussi en réaction à ce rapport là, qui a été publié sur le fait que vous avez sous-estimé, selon ce rapport, les risques de taux d'intérêt élevés, que ça vous enlèverait de la capacité pour financer des programmes canadiens.
OK, deux questions. Alors, en ce qui concerne les risques, je vais parler du trois. Premièrement, c'est l'économie mondiale. Et vraiment, il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes autour de l'économie mondiale. Si on parle, par exemple, de la Chine aujourd'hui réouvre sa économie, comme nous avons fait, comme le G7 a fait l'année passée. On avoue qu'avec l'ouverture d'économie, après les lockdowns de Covid, il y a beaucoup de phénomènes difficiles à prévoir. Et c'est le processus qu'on a dans la Chine aujourd'hui. Alors, c'est un élément d'incertitude. Deuxièmement, aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans le troisième acte dans la récession du Covid, l'acte final. Et on a vu des actions des banques centrales très vite. Et c'est la première fois dans une génération qu'on a eu un phénomène comme ça. Et pour cette raison, c'est difficile à savoir précisément quel sera l'effet précis à l'économie canadienne. Et pour cette raison, pour raison de l'incertitude qui existe dans l'économie mondiale, je pense qu'aujourd'hui, c'est très important, plus important que jamais pour notre gouvernement d'avoir une approche responsable du côté fiscal. Votre deuxième question, je ne suis pas d'accord. Et si vous regardez l'énoncé économique de l'automne, on a mis dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne un scénario alternatif. Parce que même en automne, c'était évident pour nous qu'on a eu beaucoup d'incertitudes dans l'économie canadienne et l'économie mondiale. Et pour cette raison, on a inclus dans nos projections un scénario alternatif. Et comme vous savez très bien, mais il va la peine d'expliquer pour les gens qui ne sont pas les journalistes, les économistes, le scénario de base dans notre énoncé économique de l'OTAN, ce n'était pas la création des fonctionnaires dans le ministère des Finances. Ce n'est pas la création des politiciens dans le ministère des Finances. Le scénario de base, c'est un scénario créé par la moyenne des prévisions des économistes dans le secteur privé. C'est objectif. Alors, on a pris ça comme le scénario de base, comme le Canada a fait maintenant pour 30 ans. Et c'est une pratique que je pense est importante pour l'indépendance, l'objectivité de nos projections. Mais c'était évident qu'on a eu un risque d'une économie moins forte. Et pour cette raison, on a publié un scénario alternatif. Et je pense que c'est important pour tout le monde de lire ce scénario, de voir qu'on a été ouverte avec les Canadiens, que c'était une possibilité. Et on est prêt pour ça aussi.
Minister, last year you talked a lot about how you needed to keep your powder dry, and you were keeping your powder dry. But all we're hearing right now is all the spending pressures heading into this year's budget on healthcare, on industrial subsidies, and potentially staving off an economic downturn this year. So is this era of keeping your powder dry over, and what does that mean for the fiscal track you laid out just in last year's budget?
That is an excellent question. And let me offer you three perspectives. I do think, as I've said in response to earlier questions, that there is still a lot of uncertainty in the world economy. And that means that we do need to continue to take a fiscally prudent approach. We still do not know for sure how the plane is going to land. We do not know for sure how the COVID recession is going to finally play out. And we do have the reopening of China as a new international, I won't call it a wild card, but a source of real uncertainty. Could be upside, could be downside, maybe a little bit of both. So I think taking a fiscally responsible approach, it continues to be important, and I am glad that that is the approach we took in April and in the fall. And I do want to remind people, lowest deficit in the G7 last year, that is significant. Lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 last year, that is significant. Now, you've mentioned at the same time some real fiscal pressures. Health, the need to invest in the green transition, chief among them. And I would agree with you. Those are significant fiscal pressures, and those are also issues that Canadians are looking to us to respond to. When it comes to healthcare, I hear from people every day about the importance of maintaining something which I think all Canadians are anxious about and all Canadians are really proud of. And that is our universal healthcare system. And I think Canadians rightly expect provincial governments and federal governments to work together to make sure that healthcare system works. On the green transition, this is a once-in-a-generation moment. And either Canada seizes that opportunity, seizes our share of the new industrial global economy which is being built, or we get left behind. Now, when I frame the question that way, and I think that is the only way to frame the question, I think it has to be obvious to all of us that we must seize that opportunity. So some challenging things to all do at the same time, and that's the balance we're going to have to find in the budget.
Minister, on healthcare, can you just explain a little bit your thinking on what the fact that many of the largest provinces are either at or close to budget surpluses, how that factors into your thinking about what you need to do in terms of federal contributions on a long-term basis, and whether you think actually, given all the uncertainty you've talked about that affects your own fiscal track, does it make sense to do a 10-year deal, a 7-year deal, a 5-year deal? Can you share us a little bit of your thinking on that?
Okay, well, first of all, let me thank you for the question. And that is a very important point. Healthcare, of course, is a provincial responsibility, and we respect provincial jurisdiction in healthcare. And we also understand, as I think do Canadians, that with authority comes responsibility. The fiscal position of many Canadian provinces is very strong today. And I think Canadians, quite naturally and appropriately, expect provinces to use that fiscal capacity to support the healthcare systems that all of us depend on. Now, we committed in our campaign platform to doing our share to ensure Canada's healthcare system is strong. We will be faithful to those commitments. It's a promise we made to Canadians. And I think it's entirely appropriate for the federal government to play its role in ensuring that our healthcare system is strong, is stable, and has the capacity to deal with some of the new challenges of the 21st century.
Okay.
Merci beaucoup.
The time frame?